the chat. And we'll get started in a moment. Over to you, Barry, in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barry Hudson, and I am the Director of Public Information for Montgomery County. I want to thank you for joining us for our weekly press briefing with County Executive Marc Elrich. Today, we have our normal group of folks who are here, along with some guests. Sean O'Donnell from the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, and we're joined today with special guests. We have from our Vision Zero coordinator, Wade Holland, who will be talking earlier on, and we're also joined by our Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Rich Madalena. I'm going to now make sure that everyone has their questions. When you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. If you still need the ability to record, please let us also know in the chat. There may be some things that we drop in the chat if there are some links that we want to share with you. But without any further ado, I am going to hand it over to the County Executive.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us again. As we approach the 4th of July and celebrate the 246th birthday of this nation, a lot of us are dismayed and disappointed in the direction our country is heading. This month has been one setback after another, from the progress we made on civil rights, reproductive rights, and public safety due to rulings from a politically partisan and primarily conservative Supreme Court. Last week, 2 Supreme Court rulings set our nation back to the 19th century. The Supreme Court ruling on Thursday in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, in that case, is a blow to our nation's efforts to keep us safe from gun violence. In Montgomery County, we're going to continue to do everything we can do to utilize legal opinions and explore policy proposals and innovative approaches to keep our residents safe from gun violence. And we're going to continue to advocate for sensible changes at the state and federal level. We know that, some changes were brought about out of the Senate for the first time in forever, and that's good, but the changes don't go far enough. There's still not bans on assault rifles. There still aren't adequate requirements for background checks and a host of other things. Not having done enough damage, though, with their ruling on guns on Friday, the court overturned Roe v. Wade after nearly 50 years of women having these federal protections for their health and their rights. It's the first time that somebody's constitutional rights have been snatched back away from them. And the reliance on the wisdom of the founding fathers, who no doubt did some things that are notable and good, it needs to be remembered these are the same people who had slaves, thought slavery was okay, and extended no rights to women. So the idea that we would rely on opinions from that era is just nonsense. And it's regrettable that in this case, where this country has made hundreds of years of progress trying to advance the cause of freedom and expansion of liberties in this country, that the court would choose to walk it back. On screen is a picture of me at a pro-choice rally that was put together last Friday evening in Wheaton. Around the DMV, thousands of residents, advocates, and elected officials came out to voice their frustration, sadness, and their outrage over this decision. Although the ruling was expected following the leak of a draft opinion last month, it's still shocking the court makes this kind of reactionary decision that represents a minority and extremist viewpoint. The idea of imposing a religious interpretation not shared by most people on the majority of the American population, women, is truly misogynistic. In a national poll taken by NPR, PBS NewsHour, and the Marist Group following Friday's decision, only 40% of those polled agreed with the court's decision, 56% disagreed, and 4% were unsure. That is a clear sign of how out of step this court is with the American public. So what can we do about this? First, the most important response must be made politically by voters. Currently, our democratic system is a bit rigged. It's weighted too heavily toward more rural and less diverse and less populous states. There are 6 states that are smaller in population than Montgomery County. 4 of those 6 states have 8 Republican votes in the US Senate. Montgomery County has none. And these people confirm the Supreme Court justices. There's a disproportionate of power resting in too few people. Furthermore, the Electoral College also perpetuates this inequity. The fact that Donald Trump lost the 2016 presidential election by 3 million votes, but still won the office and was able to nominate 3 justices with lifetime appointments just doesn't make common sense or any sense anymore. Second, we have to respond to this decision with action. So last month we announced that we're going to allocate $1 million in funding for nonprofits and organizations that provide abortion and women's health services. This funding was transmitted to the County Council for approval yesterday. This appropriation would allow for grants to be provided through the Department of Health and Human Services in cooperation with the Office of Grants Management. The grants are going to be available for the following purposes: assisting with wraparound services to those who are accessing abortion services, as well as to those who choose to have a child; providing grants to organizations in the county that provide abortion services, and providing organizations focused on comprehensive family planning, reproductive health, and maternal health, and also providing aid to organizations that are fighting legal battles on behalf of those seeking access to reproductive rights. Additionally, we announced on Friday that I directed our Chief Administrative Officer, Richard Madalino, to draft and circulate new policies that would prohibit county funds to be spent on conferences and travel to states that are restricting or limiting abortion rights. It remains unclear how many states have these policies and how many states that it'll apply to. But there are already 5 states on the books with abortion ban policies that are being challenged in courts. But from what we're hearing now, there are likely to be more to come. We will no longer authorize funding for out-of-state travel to places like Mississippi, Texas, and Florida. Their actions in severely restricting women's health options show a hostility toward a woman's right to choose and jeopardize safe reproductive treatments. I do want to be clear that this policy will not impact any travel or expenses that would occur for urgent public safety needs, such as mutual aid with our neighboring jurisdictions or deploying our search and rescue teams to assist with disasters when they're called upon by FEMA. And there will be an exemption process. And we do have Rich on our call today in case you have any questions. We're also going to go after businesses in these states and try to convince them to move to a place like Montgomery County, where there isn't a war on women's rights or a war on people's civil rights in general. I think there are business owners and employees who are no longer going to want to live and work in states like Texas and Florida. We're going to be proactive, advertise in these areas for them to consider coming to Montgomery County, where women's health is protected. Thankfully, Maryland passed the Abortion Care Access Act during the last legislative session, which will go into effect Friday. The act expands those that can provide safe abortion care to include nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, midwives, and insurance companies will be required to cover the procedures under the law. I support this during the session, and I continue to ensure that the county is able to do all we can to assist women in their access to their reproductive health care options. The 4th of July holiday is one of the deadliest holidays of the year in terms of DUI fatalities, and I thought this was an appropriate time to have our Vision Zero coordinator, Wade Holland, join us and provide you with a briefing on our efforts to make our roads safe for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. We have increased our spending on public safety, including 33 new signals, beacons that have been installed by the county and state in the past 3.5 years. We focused on high crash corridors in the Wheaton, Glenmont, and Aspen Hill to create more protected crossings for people walking and biking. We're also working with our federal partners to open the tunnel between NIH and Walter Reed to allow direct connection from Walter Reed to the metro. And we also have a centralized traffic safety unit focused on getting drivers to drive sober and obey the speed limit. This includes expanding our fleet of cameras. I'm now going to turn this over to Wade, and then I will take your questions on this and our earlier comments, and I'll rejoin you after that. So Wade, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. County Executive, for having us brief on Vision Zero for this before the 4th of July holiday. As you mentioned, there's a lot of people enjoying their 4th of July holidays, but unfortunately, a lot of times that involves drinking too much and getting behind the wheel of a car. AAA projects this weekend that over 1 million Marylanders will be traveling. And out of that 1 million, about the majority of them, about 880,000, will be driving this holiday weekend. It can be a very deadly weekend. So nationwide, we saw back in 2020, which is the last year we have available for national numbers, 493 people died in motor vehicle crashes over the 4th of July holiday period during that year. And actually 41% of those deaths, so 201 deaths, were actually due to alcohol impaired driving crashes. So as a Vision Zero community, we don't find that acceptable. And we have resources put in place to make sure people can get to where they need to get to safely this weekend. So there's 2 major activities that will be happening over the 4th of July holiday weekend. We have our police agencies, both Montgomery County Police and Maryland State Police, will have active saturation patrols out looking for and arresting impaired drivers throughout the weekend, especially focusing on hotspots where we have known issues with impaired driving crashes. And on the other side of it, we have the Washington Regional Alcohol Program Sober Ride Program. RAP provides up to $15 off Lyft rides. That's the company Lyft for the ride share. And Sober Ride will be active between 4 p.m. Monday on July 4th until 4 a.m. The Tuesday after that. So in addition to our work for the 4th of July holiday and other holidays, we have a lot of work ongoing for our Vision Zero program. This year, in the fiscal year 22, we actually had 114 different tasks that we are working on this year as part of our Vision Zero action plan. That includes everything from, as the county executive mentioned, the new underground tunnel connecting the metro, to smaller work like putting up flex posts to round off corners to get people to slow down while they're turning their vehicle. So some of the other highlights we have recently, so you have a new FY23 budget that starts up on Friday, July 1st. That includes over $123 million to support Vision Zero across our capital and operating budgets. And that'll help us to continue to expand our work to make safety all across our network. In the past year, we've installed our 2nd and 3rd protected intersections so that we now have 2 in downtown Silver Spring and 1 in Bethesda that opened earlier this spring as part of Bike Month. So these designs, if you're not familiar with them, provide dedicated crossing spaces for people when they are walking, biking, and driving, and also the turn radiuses are increased that allow for more slower speeds while turning to make sure that those conflicts that may actually occur happen at much slower and safer speeds. In terms of overall bikeways, beyond just the protected intersections, we actually have 8 projects currently under construction across the county, and we have 18 different projects in design. So one of those projects will be built out in future years. As the county executive mentioned, we've had over nearing 3 dozen new traffic signals since the beginning of the 2019. We actually have 24 additional beacons and traffic signals in our queue. So we're looking for more and more places to create more protected crossings for people who are walking or biking. As mentioned, we have a lot of work along our high injury network, which are the roadway corridors we've identified across the county that have highest risk for serious and fatal injury. We have 8 underway this year. 5 are nearing completion for the study part. This is the first step of the process. 3 are in design, and we had 1 along Shady Grove Road that had signal modifications to allow for safer turning movements. In terms of sidewalks, MCDOT has already installed over 5.5 miles of sidewalk this year, which is actually about a mile above our goal. Any given year, around 4.5 to 5 miles of installation this year. That includes some, anything from neighborhood sidewalk projects around schools, and also larger sidewalk projects such as outside the new White Flint or soon-to-be North Bethesda station, where actually redoing the sidewalks there to add a grass buffer and expand the width of the sidewalk to provide for a more comfortable and safer experience for people traveling between the metro there on the south entrance on Marinelli Road and to get to Pike and Rose. We're also advancing safety for our most vulnerable residents. MCDOT in the past year developed a new design toolkit to ensure our projects are inclusive and designed at forefront for people with no and low vision. This really sets the stage for many accessibility improvements beyond what we're already doing, and is already establishing Montgomery County as a leader in this field. We are actually designing mock-ups to be constructed this fall for testing, which will help us retrofit some of our certain bus stop locations across the county. As we mentioned, focused outreach, we'll continue focused outreach and enforcement throughout the holiday, but also throughout the year. Just for example, we had MCPD made over 36,000 traffic stops last year in the year 2021. Half of those were for speeding. Then, as we mentioned, we have our automated traffic cameras, and those actually issued about 317,000 citations for speeding. And in Maryland, that's a pretty significant speeding because you have to be going 12 miles or above the posted speed limit to get those tickets. So that's 317,000 times someone was driving 12 miles or over the speed limit and getting those citations. So, speeding, especially since the beginning of the pandemic, has been a major issue and something that we work on through with the design of the road, as well as our enforcement partners to bring those speeds down. As we mentioned, we're really excited for the new bipartisan infrastructure law. We are looking to gain additional funding as part of that program. So we looking to potentially get up to $5 million or more as part of a project that we're looking to propose in the next, in the next fiscal year. So that was a quick rundown of some of the larger things that are happening in Montgomery County for Vision Zero. Happy to take questions. And also we'll provide some links in the chat to show you the full rundown of projects across all our 114 items for fiscal year 22 that we've been working on to make our roads safer in Montgomery County.
Thank you very much, Wade, for that information. Reporters, if you have questions about Vision Zero at this time that you want to address to either the county executive or Mr. Holland, now's the time to do so. Any questions for them on this particular topic? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Holland, for the information. We are now going to move on to the COVID section of our briefing. So I'm going to hand it back to the county executive to give some remarks then before we hear from Mr. O'Donnell. You're on mute, Mr. Executive.
How many times did I do that? It still happens. So a few weeks ago, we were predicting the case rates were going to decline, and they have, but they're not bottoming out as low as we've seen in the past. And as you can see from this chart, rates continue to remain above 200 per 100,000 residents. And there's a substantial level of transmission in our community that we'd only previously seen in the winters of 2021 and 22. So these numbers remain high, and you can notice a little uptick there at the end. As you can see from the next graphic, Montgomery County leads the nation, or leads the state with the highest case rates. At the same time, we still have the lowest test positivity rate in the state. And this seeming paradox means that we're most likely testing more accurately than other jurisdictions, because we know that many positive COVID tests are not being reported, including here in Montgomery County. We have to assume our case rates are actually higher everywhere than what's being reported, because so many people are doing their testing at home and we don't know what the actual results are. I want to thank HHS for effectively setting up and launching our vaccination efforts in clinics to provide young children older than 6 months and up to 5 years with their vaccines last week. We still need and are asking for more vaccine to continue our clinics. We placed an order for more vaccine on Friday, but we were told to expect the shipment to arrive next week. We have enough for this weekend's clinics, but are waiting to ensure that we have vaccines in hand in order to schedule future clinics in the weeks that are out. We don't want to have to cancel any appointments. And I'll remind people also that these vaccines are also available by other providers. Montgomery County is not the sole source, and we do not get necessarily the bulk of the vaccines. So you may find them at your pediatrician. You may find them in the drugstores around the county. So be sure you go online and look to see who has them, and call your pediatrician and see what their status is. And as we continue to remind everyone to please get their vaccines and boosters, we've also mentioned in the past the holiday weekends are good times to take a booster shot, to have an extra day to feel better and recover from it. So you may get an opportunity, if you get your shot this weekend, to have a little bit of downtime while you're recovering. Next, I want to talk about Abuelina. Congratulations to our Latino Health Initiative and the public service announcements that are being produced on their behalf. 2 Emmys were won Saturday by the team that put together our Abuelina advertising and outreach campaign. This program is aimed at Spanish-speaking county residents, encouraging them to get their COVID-19 vaccines and boosters. And the PSAs were entered into the public service single spot and campaign categories. And since the pandemic began, Montgomery County has been proactive in making sure test kits, vaccines, boosters have all been distributed in an equitable way. The videos were a result of a lot of hard work by county employees and community partners and a production team contracted to put these videos together. I want to thank our partners at the Communication Shop for their creativity and their ability to create a culturally competent message that is resulting in incredible outcomes for our Latino residents. Abuelina has caught the attention of MSNBC, BBC, World News, and other national and international media outlets as an example of an effective COVID outreach campaign that has helped achieve positive outcomes. Abuelina is not only a great spokesman, but also an example of our COVID efforts and a representation toward our intentional emphasis on equity. I do want to note that Montgomery County had 2 other Emmy nominees this year. Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services video called Welcome to Reality, and Is This Recyclable? From the Department of Environmental Protection. And congratulations to all of you, and thank all those who worked on these communication projects. This week, we sent over to the council an extension of the senior tax credit, and we sent over the proposed members of the Police Accountability Board. Yesterday, the county council voted and approved an extension of senior tax credits. Their vote extends how long seniors and retired military members are eligible to apply for a 20% tax break on their homes, and extended it from 5 years to 7 years. This extension was made possible after a change in Maryland law in this most recent session. The senior tax credit is available to homeowners who are 65 years old if the property is in their name and it's their main residence. All applicants for any homeowner's tax credit must be approved by the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation. And it applies to a homeowner's property tax bill if the property taxes exceed a fixed percentage of a person's gross income. Also this week, the County Council approved all 9 members I nominated to be part of the Police Accountability Board ahead of its formation on July 1st, 2022. We received over 60 applicants for the board, and we appreciate all those who expressed interest in serving. All the nominees were vetted through my office and selected by me for confirmation by the council, and we selected a fair-minded group of residents who believe in procedural justice, and we believe these individuals will bring increased accountability and transparency and will help improve our police department and public safety in Montgomery County. So I want to congratulate all of you and thank every member of the new Oversight Committee and everyone who is considered. This is serious work we're about to embark on, and I'm looking forward to having a team that understands the importance of what we're asking them to do. And finally, before I turn it over to Earl and Sean for their updates, I want to express my outrage at the news and findings of the January 6th committee. Besides this being a pretty clear case of treason, an attempt by the former president to orchestrate a coup against our government, his actions clearly put lives in danger, and specifically the MCPD who were sent to the Capitol as part of the response to the insurrection. Donald Trump's actions were irresponsible, and it deliberately endangered the lives of employees of this government, as well as employees of the federal government and of the District of Columbia. I want to thank my Congressman, Jamie Raskin, for his work on this committee, and we're grateful that he is part of this investigation to ensure that this county and our nation get justice from the harm that was caused on this day. And with that, I will turn it over to Sean.
Thank you. My buttons disappeared for a second there. So just some brief updates, first of all, on our COVID surveillance. We have seen after a number of weeks of our cases declining, we've seen a slowdown in that decline over the last week. And we've seen now 2 days of slight increases in the number of identified cases through PCR testing. We're also seeing some increases in our hospitalizations. The 7.3% here is from our dashboard, which is now 2 days old. But in a minute, I'll just give you some updates on the current number of hospitalizations, which we are starting to see tick up a little bit. With regards to what variants we're looking at, these are projections from CDC based on previous weeks of variant typing. In our region, it's just under 50% are projected to be BA4 and BA5 infections. As you know, for many months, our increases were linked to the BA2 and BA2.12 variants. Now, with the rise of this other variant, this may be what's driving the turnaround in cases and hospitalizations. Across the US, the projections are nationwide that we're above 50% of the cases now being attributed to BA4 and more likely BA5. Looking globally, we are seeing some other countries begin to see a couple weeks now of increases of cases. It's certainly happening in Europe and starting to happen in the Mediterranean areas. You know, and it varies by country, obviously. Looking at our other states, and again, we've had some indication of what to expect in our area based on some of the other populous states on the eastern side of the U.S. Notably, as you can see from the bottom, New York State is showing some increases in cases over the last few days. And so that may be something that we're going to experience as well. Again, it's likely we have similar variants playing out. Some other parts of the country are still being affected by BA2 and BA2.12. But again, we're seeing in some cases multiple variants being transmitted through the community. So again, we'd like to remind people that how important the vaccinations are, and not just vaccinations, but staying up to date and getting those boosters. We're still seeing our cases in Montgomery County be much higher case rates, not total cases, but case rates for unvaccinated versus fully vaccinated. I don't really think there's much of a debate about how the vaccine can reduce cases, even when we're talking about these breakthrough Omicron strains. Going to the hospitalizations, we do have 119 individuals in our hospitals with a COVID diagnosis. As we've mentioned before, with the high transmission rates of these Omicron variants, some of these patients may be in the hospital for other reasons and happen to have COVID as well, but it certainly is making it challenging, more challenging for our hospitals. So that 7.3% is likely to increase as our dashboard gets updated. We have seen an increase in acute care occupancy, even while the ICU numbers are coming down a little bit. So again, we're monitoring this closely. We have heard reports of increased numbers of people going to the emergency departments as well. So these numbers are, again, as you can see from the chart, nowhere near where we were with the initial Omicron spikes. But again, we continue to monitor the more serious illness. Looking at the deaths that we're tracking as well. In June, we've surpassed the May numbers. Again, these tend to trail the spikes in transmissions by several weeks as more significant illness develops. Going over to the vaccination side, we are at 79% of those who are, actually now I think it's rounded up to 80% of 65 and older have gotten a booster. That makes us happy. Of course, this age group is now eligible for a second booster, and we're strongly recommending that for anyone 50 and older or with underlying conditions to get their second booster. Our testing sites have seen a modest decrease over the last week or so, and our positivity rates, which are higher at the county testing sites than the combination of public and private testing, that testing positivity has started to come down. We'll see how it responds to this increase in cases over this week. As a reminder, as our county executive mentioned, there families who are looking for vaccine for 5 and under, there's a large number of places. Checking yesterday with the Maryland state search engine, that coronavirus.maryland.gov, it's showing 23 pharmacies. It's showing, we really have just our health department listed as a single place since our locations are at MCPS schools and change from week to week. But if you use this engine and click on our link, you're taken to our website that shows all the locations, all the current locations we're doing it. But this also shows 9 primary care or urgent care sites with the pediatric vaccine. I know our pediatricians number, it was about 100 pediatricians that were doing 5 to 11. I believe a similar number is participating in this vaccine age group. We did not receive a full listing from the state yet on who's getting that vaccine. It may still be changing as they roll out the vaccine, but we have heard from a number of members of the community that, and from some of these pediatricians, that they are doing clinics now. And so we're very happy to hear that. I know lots of people like to go to their personal healthcare provider to get these vaccines, and that certainly makes sense. Again, you can also use the vaccines.gov if you want a slightly broader list that includes vaccination sites, not just in Maryland. And you can, of course, click on the specific vaccines that you're looking for. You can do that on the state site as well. And then just, I know we've talked about our rollout over the last 2 weeks. This past weekend, we did 6 clinics, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday at our Montgomery County Public School sites. And those were well attended. We're doing another 6 sites this coming weekend. We're doing them at Paint Branch, Shady Grove, and Clarksburg on Saturday, and again at Paint Branch, Gaithersburg, and Montgomery Blair on Sunday. We are strongly encouraging people to make appointments to ensure we have enough vaccine for those clinics. But if we have enough vaccine, we'll take walk-ups. But again, just strongly recommending to make an appointment since the demand has been pretty high. So again, we're doing these clinics in concert with our Montgomery County Public School sites. I think we may have filled up with the New Hampshire Estates school site that we're doing later this afternoon. And then finally, just to remind folks of how these doses are going out. For the 6 months to 4 year Pfizer, it's a 3-dose vaccine. Of course, we've been doing the 5 to 17-year-olds with the Pfizer vaccine as well, and that is 2 primary doses with a 3rd booster. So it does look a bit similar to that. And then Moderna is currently just 2 primary doses, unless you have you have conditions that cause you to be immunocompromised, and then it would be a third dose. Those are the updates we have on COVID and our vaccination strategies. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Stoddard for any additional comments.
I was not going to have any additional comments, but I did want to make 1.2. I talked to some of our police commanders yesterday, and we talked about 4th of July as far as safety goes. One other piece I want to remind our residents of is that fireworks are illegal in Montgomery County, including sparklers. We do know that we will get a number of reports from the public about fireworks that occur on the 4th of July and the weekend and our days and preceding and following it. Police will respond to those calls, but just recognize that they are not viewed as the highest priority calls. They're going to focus on health safety calls first. And so every year we get a lot of calls about firework complaints. Every year there are complaints from our residents that they're not responding to as quickly as they would like. Just understand that they're on holidays like this, as Mr. Holland alluded to earlier. These are very busy times for our public safety partners. They will respond to the fireworks calls, but they're going to prioritize life safety calls first. Just want to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will now open up for questions. I do have some in the chat. Reporters, if you do have questions, make sure you drop them in there. First question is from Brian from the Daily Record, and he has a question for the county executive and CAO Madalena.
Thanks. I wanted to go back and revisit an issue that the county executive raised a couple of weeks ago regarding elections and the canvassing of absentee ballots. The State Board of Elections yesterday apparently decided that it would not pursue any kind of legal action to get the courts to sign off on allowing for early counting of those absentee ballots. I wanted to ask the county executive and the county administrative officer their thoughts about how this will impact Montgomery County, and whether or not they have concerns about how members of the public might perceive the integrity of the election based on all of the things that we've seen over the last 2 years.
Mark, you're on mute.
I'm really concerned about this. We're not going to be able to start counting ballots until 2 days after the election. This could go on for a while. There's a lot of validation involved in this process. It is a slow process. If somebody has submitted a computer ballot, it's got to be transferred to the proper paper ballot before it can be read. It has to, that has to be done by hand. It has to be witnessed, I think, by 2 people. This is going to be a long, drawn-out process. And I'm worried that, people are going to, once again feel that people are messing with the electoral system, and they're going to wait till they have to get the election, and then they'll figure out how many votes somebody needs to win. I mean, all the conspiracy theories. You're in the press. You know what's out there. And our fear is it's just going to fuel more of that nonsense. And that's going to be the most damaging thing. And depending how many are outstanding, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was it 95,000 ballots were sent out. They don't always come back. Many people wind up voting in person. But if it's really, truly a substantial number of ballots that we're waiting on, there's going to be just the winner on Tuesday night might be different than the winner whenever all the ballots are counted. And that's not the kind of destabilizing effect that we need, particularly in this area of people increasingly distrusting some of the government processes. So I wish they weren't doing this. I know most Montgomery County residents will understand, but I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed and more than a little upset by this.
Brian, to give you some context, in 2018, 158,291 votes were cast in the primary. So far, as the county executive alluded to, so far this year, 95,700 ballots have been requested for mail-in or web delivery. There were only 14,900 requested 4 years ago. And as he mentioned, not all those requests to get returned, only 10,610 were returned. So, we're seeing last cycle, in 2018, less than 10% of the ballots were cast via mail-in. This year, we're looking at 60% being cast by mail-in, and that will just delay the results in our county and everywhere around the state, as the Board of Elections cannot even begin certifying the ballots. We're not just talking about counting, certifying them until the Thursday after the election. So the governor can issue an executive order, an emergency declaration to clarify this, as he did in 2020, and allow the boards to move forward with counting. There is still a solution out there if the governor wanted to use it. And certainly, I think, as the executive mentioned, this will be, I think, confusing and frustrating to voters who are used to getting a result on an election night, and that it will be days, if not weeks, to get a result from the primary. Come November, it's only going to be more so confusing and frustrating, and potentially, I think, destabilizing as people become unclear as to what's happened with results as they swing back and forth. We pointed out last time, in 2020, Donald Trump actually received more votes in person between early voting and on election day than Joe Biden. But Joe Biden received 1 million more votes than Donald Trump in Maryland via mail-in ballots. And many of those ballots could be certified and counted on election day. That potentially will not happen this cycle. And again, that could just lead to frustration and conspiracy theories, which don't serve the interests of anyone involved in the small d democratic process within the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Rich. Next question is from Dan from Bethesda Beat.
Hi, Mark. I wanted to just maybe see if you could say a little bit more about the marketing campaign that you talked about for folks from other states that might be coming to Montgomery County, for businesses to come to Montgomery County. What would the rollout of that campaign look like, and what would the messaging look like, and what would the timing be?
So we're looking to retain a company to create the advertising. The focus is going to be, say, for example, Austin. A lot of, you talk about how many people went to Austin was hip. Austin may be hip, but the women who came to Austin aren't safe. And, they're going to be subject to the draconian laws of their governor and that state legislature. The worst cases are, you could drive somebody to an airport, they could be flying out of state for an abortion, and under some of the things they've talked about, you could be arrested as an accomplice. So we want to make clear that, Montgomery County we have an amazing amount of talent. We have some really important industries here. We're poised and ready to grow. We're able to accommodate companies coming to Montgomery County. And we think that, all their employees deserve to be in a safe environment where they're welcome. And I'd extend the same thing to the LGBTQ community. There are a lot of states that are suppressing those rights. And we want to make the point that, your workforce deserves to be respected, and come to Montgomery County because we want you. And you should be in a place where you're wanted. Something like that. I'm not an advertising guy. The details of this will be left to folks who think about this as a profession, but that's sort of the direction we want to go into.
Maybe it's too early to ask this, but do y'all have like a few specific states that you're concerned about as far as, which states are going to ban abortion in the near future? Or are you looking at like Virginia, West Virginia, like which are the states that you guys are kind of focused on right now?
I think, Texas obviously stands out as a candidate. I believe Florida and Mississippi are likely candidates as well. We'll see what Governor Youngkin does. That'd be a relatively easy move for people to go across the Potomac River. They wouldn't have to deal with that bridge. So we'll see what happens in Virginia. But
hey, Dan.
why not?
If you look at Missouri, Missouri is seemingly taking action to not just ban abortions, but to take the extra step to ban the Plan B pill, to ban access to certain contraception, and to criminalize an abortion performed for any woman who conceives within the state of Missouri, no matter where they might be a resident. So you could have a Maryland resident who is sexually assaulted in Missouri and then seeks an abortion in Maryland, and that could potentially involve not just that woman, but her relatives, the doctor, anyone else working in a clinic here in a crime in the state of Missouri. So, you know, as these other states seek to not just ban and I think reduce the rights and liberties of women in their states, they are seeking to enforce their laws into our states, which is why I think the county executive found the situation intolerable for us allowing county employees to travel on county dollars at their risk into these other jurisdictions. And I'm just throwing out Missouri as an example of a state that has moved quickly in a draconian way to not just seek to disrupt the liberties of their residents, but to extend that draconian policy against people out of state, including into Maryland, which has obviously a very different approach to respecting the rights of women.
And do you have at least like a general sense maybe of how many people might be coming to Montgomery County seeking care at this point? And are the providers ready?
Look, I don't think anybody has an estimate because we'd have to know what the abortion rates are in all the surrounding states. And are we going to be the only state that's close by? Are there going to be other places that people are going to be able to go? I mean, all those things we're going to have to, get a better sense of. So, we'll deal with it as it comes. It's like, with Ukrainian or, Afghan refugees, we don't know how many are going to come here, but, we've always been prepared to, stand up and help people. It's kind of the way we do things, and it's the way we're going to keep doing things.
Thanks. I had just one more question. Mark, you had mentioned the exceptions to the travel restrictions. The exceptions are for things like mutual aid and disaster response. Are there any other sort of exceptions that would also apply?
We haven't worked out the whole list, but I'll just say, I imagine it would include things like if there was critical training that could only be received at a conference or at a meeting, then people will go for critical training. We're not going to deprive people of things they need to be able to do their job and do their job safely.
The only piece I would add to that we've already talked about is, and given clear direction to the police department on, is if they're conducting an ongoing investigation that takes them into a different state, if they're transporting a potential suspect or arrestee from a state to Maryland who's committed a crime, for example, or if they're investigating a cold case in another state, those are all things that will continue to be permitted, unfettered.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next question is from Chelsea from Axios.
Hi, thanks so much for holding this. It sounds like Dan asked actually quite a few of my questions, but I did have one more for you, Mark. You said that the funding for expanded abortion access was transmitted to the council yesterday. Do you expect it to be approved? And if so, how soon, and how soon might it get into the hands of providers?
I assume the council is going to act quickly, because obviously this train is now rolling down the track, and we're going to make sure we can expedite. We have new contracting procedures that should facilitate this. Our big, the important thing for us is working with the providers to understand where they think the most need for this money is going to be. It's not something we should guess about on our own, but we're going to make sure we're tightly working with them to make sure that the money goes where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm. And as a follow-up to that, you had mentioned a few different areas that this funding can be used for. Do you expect it to be used to build new abortion clinics or new places where people can seek abortions?
I think one of the interesting things that's evolved with new state law is that there are a lot of different people now who can provide abortions. You're not going to have to go to a clinic. It can be done by a doctor. I believe it can be done by a nurse. There's been a vast expansion. And so people aren't going to be able to stand outside of an abortion clinic and think they're stopping abortions. It's going to be much more readily available, and which hopefully will make it much more difficult for people to figure out where a person's having an abortion. People are entitled to their privacy. And it would be nice if women didn't have to endure the insults and attacks from people as they're attempting to get medical assistance.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key features is that Governor Hogan thus far refuses to expedite the release of funds that were included in the state budget around training additional personnel that the county executive has alluded to. So one of the things that we will be using a portion of the $1 million, assuming it's approved by the county council, would be to expedite some of that training for those additional providers. So ultimately, given the flexibility that the county executive alluded to in the state law and the dollars that we and the state both have, we expect that there will be increased access for abortion providers in Montgomery County and across the state of Maryland as a result.
And Chelsea,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you look at the photo that was showed earlier in the press conference of the county executive standing with members of the county council after the draft opinion was leaked, you will see that I think if not all of the council members, a large majority of them were standing with him on the day that he announced that we would be moving forward with this type of funding effort. So this is not coming as a surprise to them, and certainly many of them, if not all of them, have voiced their support for this.
Thank you. And just real quick, that funding for training, that's to train eligible providers to be able to perform abortions. Is that correct? Right.
And that the list of who is eligible grew this year with a bill that was sponsored by a Montgomery County delegate, Ariana Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Our next question is from Kate Ryan from the TOP. Kate, you there?
Sorry, I was scrambling for that mute button. There we go. I did want to follow up, and forgive me, I came in a little late on this, but the situation with travel to states that bar abortions or that have trigger laws that are going into or have gone into effect, about is there a dollar figure attached to that? In other words, the cost to the county to send those people? And is this a large segment, or is this, I think some people might go, this is just symbolic. Is it, how big a deal is this? Forgive me, but I'm trying to figure this out.
I gotta be blunt. I mean, where conferences are held change every year. And we're hoping we're not the only jurisdiction that decides to do this. What would be effective is if multiple jurisdictions did this and told conference holders, don't expect us to attend your conferences. If that starts happening in a decent number, we would have an even bigger impact, because hopefully the conferences, and this has happened before where people moved conferences out of states that were doing aberrant things regarding civil rights. And so hopefully it gets bigger. And I think, the larger impact will be the effort to recruit businesses from those states to come here. That's when I think you really start having an impact on people. But, I think it was important to do something other than just, go out and protest to say how horrible this is. So the immediate thing in our hands is to control our participation in conferences, and that's what we're going to do. But we're not stopping there.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional questions from the media? Any additional questions for any of our guests today or the county executive? I'll do it again, going once, going twice. 3 times. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We'll be back again next week with more information. Be safe during this holiday weekend. And as Dr. Stoddard indicated, that fireworks are illegal in Montgomery County. But be safe, enjoy the live events that will be taking place. We have fireworks returning back to the county on, I believe, Saturday and on Monday. So you can go to our website and check that out. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.